Hello and welcome. My name is David, and you are listening to Change Your Mind podcast, episode 8.
1, 2, 3, 4.
My mission is to redefine personal development, make it much more accessible for everyone, and convince as many people as possible that change is possible, no matter what is your current situation. The podcast is one of the parts of that mission realization, along with the blog, to which the link you can find in the description of this and every episode. In this series, I'm interviewing inspirational people, and also I'm sharing my experience and thoughts, which make you think and encourage you to take an action. My today's guest is Diarmuid Lavelle. He has been working as a life coach and therapist full-time for the last 26 years and giving training in self-development since 1993. He trains therapists and coaches in various methods of brief therapy and groups in NLP and stress reduction. He also written many published articles in local and national newspapers as well as radio interviews. His goals are to publish more ideas and constantly improve his effectiveness to help others. Currently, he is working for the EU, training consultants and trainers in motivational strategies in Poland, Germany, Spain, and Brussels. We are talking about various topics including habits management, what personal development means for him, how to work with clients who would like to change something in life, how to find a why behind willingness to change, what is his role as a life coach and therapist, and why making mistakes is a very good thing for our personal development. I'm so happy that I had the chance to make that interview, so I hope that you will enjoy it as well. If you like this episode, please share it with your friends, and right now let's move on to the conversation.
3, 2, 1. Yeah.
Thanks, Diarmuid. I know how to pronounce your name, but maybe you can you can correct me if I'm wrong, because it's tricky one, I
Yeah, it's a
believe.
difficult one. Okay.
Yeah, so I invited you to my podcast because I'm really curious about the people actually who are working as a psychologist and therapists and so on. And your experience in that area really impressed me. And also, I had a chance to speak to Majana with whom you work for a long time already. But first of all, I think I would like to present and talk about your experience. So if you would like to introduce yourself and talk a little bit more about your experience in many areas where you are working currently.
Okay. God, that's a big open question, but of course I'll give it a go. I'm working in therapy and also in mentoring and life coaching. I also train therapists and life coaches with some of the techniques that I use. And I've quite a broad range, but I've several core principles that I work through, and I find that those core principles really work well for people. So my training would be I did a bit of psychology in university, but I didn't major in psychology at the time. I changed much later on over into therapy and life coaching. And I originally started with brief therapy, so very short bits of therapy. So I'm more a solution oriented therapist, I suppose.
Like a coach or
Yeah, like a coach, but maybe I suppose the difference between and I could be wrong here. The difference between a coach is a coach takes you from the present point to the future.
future.
Therapist will jump to any particular point in a person's life to disconnect limiting beliefs, trauma, limiting decisions, and things like that. So that's what I would also do as well.
I want to start with, let's say, your definition of the personal development. How do you understand that? Because I believe that since you started your work in that area 26 years ago, if I remember correctly,
Yeah.
a lot of things changed. So, if you would like to describe how, what does it mean for you, the personal development
Okay.
currently
Yes.
and from the past experience?
All right. Well, I suppose that we all come to around to personal development and think that to improve ourselves. We kind of think, oh, well, either we look around and we think, I'm not doing so well, I could be doing better, or we begin to suspect that there's something more within us and things like that. Um, but so then we learn different techniques or go out and find out advice that how we can do better. And that's a good thing. It's like education. So we find out, we come along and we find out, well, if we were educated and we knew much more about the world, we'd be better in the world. So that's kind of the simplistic part of how would you say, of coaching or of developing. So it's like an athlete comes up and says, I'm not doing so well in my races. I want a coach that will coach me and train me, and I'll do better in my races and things like that. So that's fine. Um, and I suppose that's the attitude that I took when I started into coaching and counseling and therapy. I've changed a lot over the years. That when I now look at things in a different way. And I suppose to a certain extent, the way that I look at it really is that, you know, there's a fundamental part in human beings and especially about personal development and coaching and things like that. And um, there is a kind of a culture out in society is that to be the best that we can be, to reach our full potential, to be super this way or super that way, super rich or super intelligent or super good looking or super whatever. And to a certain degree, that is causing an awful lot of corruption, I think, within the human mind. Because what it does is it connects our so-called potential with our identity. And what I mean by that, David, is that if I'm not, doing these marvelous things, then I'm no good. Okay. So if the and if I'm like that, then my behavior on the outside is connected to my personal identity and well-being. That's where we run into trouble. Okay. And so I'll explain it like this. Supposing somebody comes in and they want to give up cigarettes. Okay. Oh, and what I normally do is when people come into cigarettes, I get them to like themselves for smoking and to enjoy the cigarettes. It's the first thing I do. Now, a lot of clients leave my office and think I'm, wacko. But the reason why I have to do that is because of the messages that we get from society, culture, conventional religion, all that kind of stuff. If I am doing something that is harmful or bad, I am wrong. Okay. So what that does to the mind is it breaks it up. So now, instead of my motivation, my potential being real, it's fragmented. So if I don't like me for smoking because I'm bad and I should be looking after my health and it's a disgusting habit and it looks terrible, blah blah blah, and I reject that part of me that smokes, now I'm divided. And if I try and stop smoking, as you'll talk to any smokers try to stop smoking, there's war, absolute war. That's why people don't just go, oh yeah, sorry, I should give up the smoking because it's bad for my health, and they throw the cigarette away and they never smoke again. That doesn't really happen. What happens is they throw the cigarette away for a while and then they go cracked because their mind revolts and says, I
Yeah.
want my cigarette back. And so it's the same to do with, getting rich or what you call it, losing weight is the same thing. A lot of that is very, very prevalent where the person dislikes their bodies and has a degree of self-disgust. They don't like themselves because they're overweight, you know, and that then that fragments the mind, and then they want to then they try to proceed with dieting and exercise, but there's another part of the mind that will fight that. It's almost like that with we have a noble part within ourselves. And if we're told what to do and told that we're no good and that we're wrong and we should change, that noble part kicks back and it goes, don't tell me what to do. I am more important than that. And so we go back to our old behaviors. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you touch a very important point about habits, which is quite also interesting for me. But on the other hand, this society pressure is something that many people are looking on right now. That your wife, your parents, your coworker, your friend, or whatever random person in the internet is telling you that you need to stop that. So this is kind of the norms that people are creating. But okay, but this, for me, the personal development is about um making the small, let's say, improvement every day. So I'm counting on this compound interest, that if I will be doing every day the very small something better, I know 0.00 something percent, if I will do this for the certain period of time, it will give me a lot,
Yes.
a big result. But for example, and this is what I telling everyone who would like to start with the personal development, that you don't have to make a big change today. I mean, as in this example of quitting smoking, I think it's a bit tricky because it's a habit. I'm not smoking, but so I don't know how it's feel like to smoke. But I think that smoking is very good example of habit. But this habit is not only a habit per se; it's also something that have something behind that. You are smoking because you have this cue, or you are smoking because you have the reason for that. So I'm saying all of that because that my next question is about, if you have the person that is coming to you and saying, okay, I would like to be a better person. So
Mm.
what is your assessment?
Very
I
good.
mean, if you are doing any assessment of that person, because I also meet the therapists and people that person X is coming to the therapist with the problem Y, but this problem is not the main problem of that person. Is the problem that is being a problem to hide any other problem, if I saying
Yes,
this correctly. So get back to the question: what is the assessment? How
I
to
see.
assess
Okay.
the
Yeah,
people's
very good.
problem?
Yeah, that's a good question, because in actual fact, if somebody comes into you and they say, well, I want to improve as a human being, then the question I would ask is why? Why do you want to improve? Okay, so now that's if the person goes, oh, because I can see that I can do better, okay, and doing better gives me a nice feeling. That's where a coach would take over, not really a therapist, because the coach would say, well, if you want to feel better in yourself physically, you need to get fitter, so you do these exercises, or socially, you need to meet more people, or diet, or things like that. So they'll have direction. But if they say, I want to be better so that I can accept myself, or so I can love myself more, that's a problem. Okay? Because it means that the person is not accepting or loving themselves like they are. So they have rejected parts of themselves. And if we reject parts of ourselves, like we're programmed to do, then it's very, very difficult to move forward. So that's where a therapist would come in and say, okay, why is this person negatively judge themselves so that they're unacceptable? And the only way that they have to be acceptable to themselves is they have to change. Because if I say to myself, I have to change, I'm unacceptable, the changes aren't really going to change that. The problem is I'm unacceptable. Do you see what I mean?
Mhm.
So the, and this is plays back now, within that, and I'm not discounting personal development at all. But in actual fact, when we move through the world and we do the best with what we have at the time, every decision, the bad decisions and the good decisions, within our emotional, physical, and mental state, we make the best decision. Every decision that we make is the best decision at the time. But what we tend to do is we have this idea of right or wrong or good or bad. We look back at our decisions, or back at our behaviors, and we go, that was wrong, that was right, that was good, that was.
And this is the source of disappointments, I would
Yes,
say. Yeah,
yes,
yeah, do we assess, okay, uh, it's kind of, when you are looking on your Facebook, what you posted, for example, I don't know, 10 years ago, and I did it, for example, that I looked back on my Facebook and what I posted 5, 6 years ago, and I deleted.
yeah,
It was
yeah,
that I had that time that because I was shame of that. I feel the shame. So I think it's really similar to that, that
yes,
people tend to, you know, uh, feel the shame because they did something in the past. So okay, so my question is how to avoid that shame. I mean, is
yes.
it is
That's a
it
good
yeah.
question. Yeah. I suppose is to understand and broaden how we think about the human being. Okay. So, there's plenty of studies shown that we're actually quite predetermined. Now, this is not a nice thing for the self-developed people here, including myself, okay, is that we're quite programmed to react in certain ways, you know, um, and so we have a conscious choice to a certain degree, but we need to have another choice that is not conscious and that bypasses the conscious mind. And this is very important. Take a basic idea of I'm in a field, I'm going for a walk, I turn around and there's a bull behind me. You know, that's not a good place to think consciously. Okay, so I say, there's a bull. What will I do? Will I run? Will I, that? So what happens in that particular incident is my parasympathetic nervous system releases the control, and my sympathetic nervous system takes over fight or flight, and I run. Okay, that's what I do. Whether I make it or not doesn't really matter. Depends on the bull is faster than me. But so and there's and so that's a very basic a process about the way the brain works. But that same principle is within everyday life. Is that we move forward and we think that, oh no, I have conscious control. We don't actually. An awful lot of us of the behaviors that we're doing are coming from our own programming. Now that doesn't mean that we're doomed and we don't have any choice at all. But it means we need to understand and be more compassionate and forgive ourselves for the things that we've done. But that was a lovely example. Like, we put up on Facebook, some uh, uh, belief or attitude that we had back 10 years ago. And then we look at it now because we're stronger and wiser and we go, oh my God, I better delete
What
it.
I did.
Okay. And so, but at the same time, we have to understand that we're mistake making entities. Human beings make mistakes all over the shop. And we've been sold this idea that we don't or we're not supposed to. And in actual fact, studies have shown that anything we do, we get about 60 to 40% right. So that
It's
means
a good ratio, actually,
it's
I would
fairly good.
say.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
fairly good. Now, if you're a specialist at something, you'll get it about 80% right. If you're doing the same thing over and over and over and over.
Mm.
But life is so arbitrary, and there's so much of life beyond our control that when we sell ourselves the idea that we are in control and we have this will and we can do life this way, we really are going to get disappointed. And I think it's about that, to allow ourselves to make mistakes and allow ourselves to grow and to not take ourselves so seriously. And a lot of the problems today is people take themselves so seriously as if they were serious entities, and they neglect the power of humor and of looking at things in a humorous way. Because humor, when you laugh, a huge big wave of connective electricity moves across the brain and unites it. It's a way that we can blow out limiting beliefs and decisions is by humor. But we take ourselves far too seriously when we should really look at how we're moving through life. It's haphazard. It's like it's a lotto. And now that doesn't negate, okay, well then it's helpless. I can't do anything, so therefore I won't improve. But it depends on what's behind the improvement. Why are we trying to improve? Is it again coming back to, are we trying to improve because we should, because other people expect it to us? Not a good idea. Is it we're trying to improve because if I improve, I accept myself, but if I don't improve, I don't accept myself? Again, not a good idea. And so, where does that leave us? That leaves us to come into ourselves and go, as I am now, as I see myself as a mistake making human being, as a person who's always trying to do the best with what they've got, as those decisions we only have enough information for, so we make them. And as I say again, there are no unresourceful people. There are only unresourceful states. We get into unresourceful states. So, given that, is to understand and have compassion for the whole being, for our whole selves. Now, if we have that and we understand the different parts of ourselves will be in conflict, and to understand that conflict, it will always be there. But if you bring in self-compassion and connection, the conflict ceases, and there's now more cooperation and communication within the parts. Now we can really know what we want. We're not pushed around by what other people think we should be. We're not pushed around what ourselves think we should be to be acceptable. We have now a dynamism within personal development that's really powerful. Okay, so we've united all the cells together, and this is what I'm go back to the smoking analogy. Is that you don't make it wrong or bad. You make it, well, you just smoke because you're with the other teenagers down the back of the school, and you wanted to bond with them, so they were doing this, so you did that. If you were playing classical violin, you'd probably bought it and played classical violin. That's what you did, and then you did it so much it goes into muscle memory, and now you just do it out of habit. But you're not bad or wrong for smoking. You know?
So yeah, um it leads me to the, let's say, statement that there is no wrong habits. I mean,
Yeah,
because all of the habits are, there is a reason for every single habit.
every
So
behavior is a
yeah.
positive intent. Yeah,
And I think that the biggest problem that we might have is not the people around us, but is everything what we have inside us. I would say that there is a big monster inside us that working against us, and is trying to convince that we are bad people, we are doing wrong all the time, and so on. And also that example of the Facebook wall and what you posted, for example, 5 years ago, reminds me that it's actually can be a proof that you did a progress, because, for example, 5 years ago you wrote something in a poor English, but right now you can make a conversation in that language, for example.
yes, exactly. Good. Yeah,
And
exactly.
but this is related to the question that I have about the beliefs and values, because I also found it on your profile that you are working with that. So how to find these beliefs behind habits and behind, I don't know, problem that people might have. Is it kind of the only conversation that you need to have with that person, or is about, going deeper to the what happened in the, I don't know, in the childhood, or anything else?
Yes, sometimes it is. Okay, so if we look at life itself, we're talking trauma, all right? That's it. So we have two kind of very powerful forces within the human being. One is a fear of abandonment, fear of being alone. And this fear carries throughout life and is just as visceral when we're babies as when we're adults. And the other is the one for love. And so we have these huge forces around us, and we're in between these two forces, being like a ping pong ball. And when we do crazy stuff to get away from fear of abandonment, And this is how, I suppose, commerciality today makes us, you're acceptable if you have this, and you're not acceptable if you don't have those. So you better get out there and buy it. So that's the drive behind consumerism is dissatisfaction. If you don't have dissatisfaction, you won't consume. So and then we want love because love really feels good, and love is a unifying force. And so we do crazy things to go and get that, or try and get it, and we make mistakes, a lot of mistakes in doing that. But so, say for example, if there's a limiting belief or decision that somebody's trying to do something, but some emotion comes up inside and it gets them to stop, like a phobia, or they want to go out and they want to talk to people, and every time they try and do that, they feel an intense fear, and they don't know why. And well, then you're talking about usually a part of them that has been created at a younger age, that they did speak out or they were talking to people, and when that happened, they got a very bad shock. Okay. And this happens all the time. If you go into school and we're learning something, and you put up your hand and you say, is this the right answer? And somebody'd say, no, it's the wrong answer. And we go, oh, it's very hard. Teacher doesn't have time to
Yes,
be
that's true.
gentle. They have to look after a whole class of people. They can't be, uh, um, uh, giving us understanding all the time, unfortunately. Um, so then we learn that actually speaking out, you can get hurt. And what often happens if that hurt is very strong, there's almost a part that becomes inside the human being that becomes a protector. And that part becomes a protector anytime it's that person stands up in front of a group, that protector hits the panic button and says, sit down. Okay. The protector is created at the same moment where the person got the shock. So it could be 7 years old in school or 5 years old in school, got a big shock. That 5 year old, that part that stops us talking to other people is still 5 years old. And it's still hitting the panic button. Does that make sense?
Mm.
So part of my work is to simply get the person to reconnect with that part and understand and that part, and then get that part to cooperate with the other parts and grow up to that same age. That's one of the ways you could do it, David. There's other ways of connecting with the way that we organize time and getting the. But mainly, I will use the unconscious mind to make those changes. All change, all learning, is all behavior is unconscious. So I get the unconscious mind to go back. The part was very badly traumatized, and get the unconscious mind to resolve it. So you don't have to go through consciously a trauma again to resolve it. No, that's not a good way. In my book, it's not good therapy to go
Mm.
to bring somebody back and dump them into the situation again.
Yeah, but yeah, at the beginning, you mentioned that you are not, you not working with the clients on a long term basis, just as a short help, let's say me in that way. So, what is the reason behind that? Do you do you believe that
Um,
there is? I mean, is there any particular reason that you don't take care of the long term therapy,
oh,
or
no,
do?
not really. It's
Mhm.
I don't kind of present myself in that way. I mean, I do have clients stretching back for years, and they often come to me for different things, and I won't see them for month on month, and then they ring me up and say I have a bit of a problem with this. I do that, um, but no, I use it. It depends on the type of therapy that you're using. So brief therapy would mean that somebody comes to you and you find out all about the problem. Okay, all the details and how they're doing, the past, the future, how they think, how they imagine, and things like this. And then you find out all about what the solution would look like. And then you go from here to there. So now there are other therapists like maybe Freudian psychoanalysis, where the therapist would literally reflect back. So everything you say, the therapist will reflect back, and that's a good thing. If that suits people, um, so they talk about themselves and talk about, then the therapist will ask the odd question. and sit there through the thing and be present with the person, give them space to talk. That's sometimes necessary, but I don't do that stuff. So if somebody comes to me and says, what kind of therapy? I say, look, I'm solution orientated. I am working. The minute you sit down, we're working on the solution and we're working to get rid of the problem. Um, some therapists would say, well, are you not taking the autonomy away from the client because they're not solving it in their own head? And I say, well, they are solving it in their own head. I'm not solving them for them. And what you call it, I find that very boring. For me personally, I couldn't stay there listening to somebody and nodding and then saying, okay, next week, same time, and take all their money off them. I just can't do. Now,
Mhm.
I'm not cutting it down. I think it's very necessary for some people, and some clients will come in and they'll say, I had somebody recently who came in and I said, this is what I do. And I said, gosh, I really find that I don't like it. I prefer somebody to be present and just reflect back and just be with me. And I said, good, okay, but that's not me. I don't do that.
Yeah. So, I mean, of course, I believe that you had that situations in the past that someone came to you and you decided that you are not the right person for that
Mm,
individual.
mm, mm.
It was the case in your
Yes.
example.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, it has to be. I think as a coach or a therapist, as a counselor, if somebody may come in because we're all divergent, we're all different. Somebody may come in and sit down in front of you, and if you get a feeling in your body of no, if you dislike this client, which happens, and you just get a feeling that they're maybe not disliked, but they're diametrically opposite. We run into people that we really like and love, and instantly we just like them and we want to be around them. We feel good around. We also run into people that we just cannot connect with, and they talk in our language, but we don't understand what they're saying. Avoid them because you do no good for them and they do no good for you. So sometimes, and in the past, in my experience, I remember opening the door to a client and I remember the feeling in my body saying, this person, no, I can't do it. And attempting to move forward with the coaching. And it didn't work at all.
Mm.
And really I had to kind of go, gosh, next time I feel that feeling, I'm going to go with it. It's not a prejudice. It's just a a feeling that this person is just diametrically opposite. We're not going to connect, and that's okay.
And I think that this is the good advice, piece of advice for someone who is looking for the therapist, that you can go to the first therapist that you find in the internet, but it doesn't mean that you will match with that person. That
Yeah,
it can
exactly.
take time to find the right one. It should be some, I don't know how to call it, connection.
Rapport. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, connection. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And
between you therapists.
yeah, it's right. And some therapists would take you on only after they meet you. They would say, "Come down to the office and we meet for 10 minutes and see can we work together." And that's very, very valuable as well.
And first session is for free.
First session is for free. Yeah, we work together. Yeah, very good. Very good.
Yeah, so what is the difference in your work between the therapist and the life coach? Because I also meet different people who is titled
Yeah.
as a life coach, and I know, let's say, what does it mean, but in your particular example, what is the difference between the therapist and the life coach? How are
Oh,
you switching between these two roles?
okay. Well, I don't really know when I switch to the roles anymore. I mean, I've learned many different types of therapy, and I don't know which therapy. I couldn't really know what therapy I'm doing with somebody at a particular thing. I could be saying, "Oh, I'm doing core integration." I could be doing, but a lot of the time, I don't know what I'm actually doing because I've amalgamated so much in my head. My impression of coaching is just that the person is here, they and they need direction and they need how to do the direction. So how and where I think a coach would work with. A therapist would work with why. Why are they not going in this direction? Why do they want to go there? Okay, so therapists work with why, and coaches work with how and where, and that would be the thing. And quite, I suppose, to a certain extent, quite a lot of coaches would often then become therapists because they inevitably you're going to run into somebody who says, well, I want to know where and how, but then they realize that they're not getting it, even when the coach outlines these are the things that you need to do and these are the things that you need to practice. Okay, and if that's not working for them, then there's the why question comes up. So a lot of coaches would start to study different types of therapy to find out, well, how can I disconnect them from a limiting belief or decision? You know.
And I think that, it's also additional question here, how to become that person like you. Because in my understanding, being a coach, okay, maybe I'm not saying that it's easier, but I mean, therapist is a kind of the person who needs to take the studies, who needs to be specialized in that area. But coach is about, taking the certification, having the supervisor, having the, number of hours of the, coaching with the clients. So if you would like to recommend it to someone being a therapist and a coach, what kind of the I know what kind of the what is the way to be that person, and another question is what kind of the skills that person should have to become that person.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. I see. I think that I suppose one is a love or curiosity of human change and human beings. That's one, and a kind of a compassion for maybe when you see somebody struggling to help them. I mean that's basically it. You become a coach because oh you're struggling with something. I can actually help you to do better, and that's basically the same, and you get a joy out of that, which is very satisfactory. Um, and I think it's the same as a therapist. Now, the path you take there um, is rich and varied. So I would think that when you start coaching and you get your supervisor and you get your hours in, you get your certificate, is then is to study the things that you need to study to become a better coach. Eventually, you'll end up becoming a therapist if you do that, and you find that you would, because that's my path. When I started, I was a coach. I said, "Well, okay, I'm fine," and all I did was I cherry picked different techniques that I read about, and I said, "I want that because I can see how it helped." And as that kept going and going and going, then I decided that I wanted more. Now, probably part of the reason why I went in and did a master's, that because I had the time, I was curious about the subject of cognitive behavioral therapy at the time. And luckily, in my country, they were saying, all right, if you have a degree in counseling, you can be a counselor, but not a therapist, but you have to have a master's. Now, luckily,
Mhm.
at that particular time, I went, well, I'm a therapist. That's what I do. So I went into that form. But I think that the thing is follow a path of your own improvement, of how you accept and yourself and how you accept others, and find out. Just keep collecting things that make you more efficient and better at what you do. That's all. And inevitably, because you do that, the road that you take presents itself naturally to you. Okay, so when I came up to do my master's, that was a natural progression. It wasn't scary. It wasn't, I shouldn't do that, should I? Should I? It just went, oh yeah, I need to do this now. At whatever time of your life it come, because we as we get older and we get more experienced, we usually get better only, this is very important, if we keep in the center of our direction a compassion for self and others. Okay. So sometimes people will come into a thing and say, well, is there any money in therapy? There's great money in addictive therapy. Great, I'll become one of them. So, and how much money can I make per client? And I'll have like 8 clients a day, and I can make a couple €1,000 a week. And you know,
It's not working that way, right? It's not
it
that
doesn't
simply math.
really, it doesn't really work. At the same time, if you're a coach or therapist and you've put in the time and you're doing good work, you need to get rewarded financially for that as well. I
Mm.
mean, because sometimes coaches and therapists, they especially therapists, because they come from the caring profession, um, they they sometimes go a little bit too much to help people, and forgetting that whether we like it or not, it's up to the person. We can guide them, we can show them, but we can't change them. They have to change. And now there is another kind of guiding principle that is always very good. There is no inflexible clients. There's only inflexible therapists and coaches. And that is a kind of a maxim to live by, not necessarily true, but it's an interesting one to live by. It puts us in 100% responsibility for helping that person. If I decide that I'm going to live by that principle, because if I live by the principle, well, that person didn't change, they weren't ready, and it was up to them. It's not my fault. That's the opposite of it. That's not doing anything at all. Does that make sense, David?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think that, um, it is very useful. And I think that for people who are thinking about that, let's say being that person is not about, there is no reward at the beginning. I mean, the reward might be, the client who is coming to you after some time and saying that, the therapy with you worked, simply. So, I think that it's very useful, and I would like to thank you for that conversation.
Hmm.
So, as a final note, what I should wish you for your future?
Oh, but to wish what I would wish you for the future.
No, no, no.
Sorry.
I you.
Oh, what do I wish for myself? Is it?
Yes.
Oh, I suppose to keep going what I'm doing and keep learning. I know that if I look up stuff and I learn it, okay, and say I'm looking at peer-reviewed stuff and scientific neuroscience and things like that, that knowledge that I have and that way of working with clients um, uh, is more effective than it was before because we learning it get better. But it is not the way. It is just on the path where it's getting better. So it's about consistent improvement all the time. A therapist or coach never arrives anywhere. They just keep going and improving and improving and improving. And then when we have to die and go across the veil, we can kind of smile to ourselves and went, that was great fun. That's it.
So I would like to wish you all the best then, and
Thanks very much.
having that curiosity to learn as much as you
Yeah,
can. And thanks for this
curiosity,
conversation. Thanks for this
curiosity, fascination,
conversation.
and wonder. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for sharing this knowledge, and see you next time then.
Pleasure talking to you. Take care.
Thanks for the listening. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation. I'd like to invite you to listen to other episodes, visit my blog, and talk to me on my social media. See you next time.